I made a deliberate effort to avoid watching any and all impeachment content this week, mainly because I don't want to accidentally slip into a coma. I can't believe how the historic attempt to remove a sitting president has been cheapened so much it's hardly even news. And hey, if senators, including Democrats, are devising creative ways to stay awake through this thing, I'm not going to subject myself to these clowns who somehow made their circus boring. And so I skipped that stream and I scrolled through the entire internet looking for literally anything else to watch. And ultimately, the anything else I landed on was Vice News' Brown and Black Presidential Forum, 8 Democratic candidates taking questions about race issues in Iowa on MLK Day. I can't believe I actually chose to sit through this, but hey, anything's an action movie compared to the live study on elderly sleeping patterns. There is actually a reason I came to this stream, though, and it's not just the irony of an event designed only for certain races somehow being anti-racist. Somehow I don't think the same kind attitude would extend to the Fox News White Presidential Forum, for example, if that was a thing. I came to this stream because I saw a headline that Pete Buttigieg had proclaimed his love for Popeye's chicken during this event. This, of course, comes after Pete controversially praised Chick-fil-A last March. Apparently, he's now atoning for that sin while seizing the opportunity to pander up just one black person to vote for him in South Carolina. No word yet on how well Pete thinks Popeyes pairs with watermelon and purple drank. By the sound of it, this had all the makings of a Hillary hot sauce type moment, so I had to see it for myself, and I watched through this stream looking for it, but I actually didn't find it. So if you see this clip floating around out there, please do send it my way. It wasn't a total waste of time, though. In listening through this event, I actually heard a segment that's much more interesting and substantive. Mayor Pete and the event hosts consider the question of whether doctors should be allowed to be racist. Well, what does racist mean and who's doing the allowing? Those are questions we'll get to in a minute. But first, the context of this question is set up by Pete claiming that unequal maternal mortality rates across races are evidence of systemic racism.
I knew about the numbers of what's going on with the black maternal mortality gap, but it was really from listening a lot to the people I've encountered that I got a better sense of how those disparities have come about. How it's everything from the way that patients are being treated when they are in a clinical environment to things that happen before they even cross the doors. I've learned that there is a necessity before anyone cares about what's in your plans to convey what's in your heart.
I actually don't care about what's in your heart. Call me old-fashioned, but I care about what's in your brain. I care that you diagnose problems correctly and propose practical solutions. If you get the problem and the solution wrong, but you're very kind-hearted about it, that's just the road to hell paved with good intentions. But the host follows up with this claim.
You brought up maternal mortality, which I want to follow up on. What can a president do about the fact that when you actually drill down in the data, a lot of what appears to be happening is purely individual racist incidents? A white doctor looking at a black woman on a table and saying, I'm just not going to work as hard for you today, and coming into the room with some stereotypes.
Throughout this exchange, that claim is just taken as granted, that this country is full of racist white doctors who don't value black women, and that's why there's a higher rate of black women dying in childbirth. If that sounds oversimplified, that's because it is. The New York Times published a story on this issue last year, citing CDC data that are the basis for this claim that racism causes black women to die of pregnancy-related complications. 42.8 black women die per 100,000 live births. That compares to 13 white women. In other words, the CDC says black women are 3.3 times more likely than white women to suffer a pregnancy-related death. The actual CDC report doesn't make definitive claims about causes, and they certainly don't blame racism as the sole or even primary explanation. That's just Vice News ladies editorializing and Mayor Pete happily following her lead, but there's plenty of reason to doubt that explanation. First and foremost, obviously, there are lifestyle considerations. The New York Times story notes risk factors are not equal across races. Black women have higher obesity rates, and while the Times tries to downplay that reality, their own reporting acknowledges the primary causes of these maternal deaths are heart failure and stroke. Now, I'm not a doctor, but neither is this Vice News host, and neither is this Times author, and it doesn't take a doctor to tell you two obvious things about obesity. One, it is inextricably linked to a long list of poor health outcomes, and two, It's generally a product of lifestyle choices. No racist can slur you into obesity, and no anti-racist compassion can erase its inherent health risks. And that's just true regardless of race. That's why if you compare the modern numbers to numbers from decades past, maternal mortality is actually getting worse for both black women and white women. Maternal mortality for white women from 1979 to 1992 was 6 per 100K. That's more than twice as high now. Maternal mortality for black women then was 25.1 per 100K. That's nearly twice as high now. If it's racist white doctors looking out for their own, why aren't they able to save the white women who are experiencing the same sort of proportional maternal mortality increase corresponding with poor lifestyle choices? You'll notice in this study from 2000 that the American Medical Association was citing the interaction between health-seeking behaviors as a primary driver, not physician racism. The CDC in 1999 said that in addition to obesity, unplanned pregnancies are also associated with increased mortality rates. These women less often seek prenatal care, among other contributing factors like smoking, drinking, unsafe sex, and poor nutrition. Did doctors really get more racist since then? Or are women across races making the same poor health choices that doctors were warning about 20 years ago? And lastly, if it is racism, they're not just bad doctors, they're bad racists. As the Times notes, the maternal mortality rate for Hispanic women is actually lower than the rate for white women. 13 deaths per 100K for white women, 11.4 for Hispanic women. So now it's racist white doctors who hate black people and only black people. They actually really enjoy a good burrito, I guess. It's a totally bunk premise, but they're sticking with it anyway. Unequal health outcomes automatically mean racist doctors. But that's how we finally arrive at our question of the day. Should doctors be allowed to be racist?
How do you legislate against that? How do you fight that from the office of the president?
Well, you fight it, first of all, by making a health equity strategy at the centerpiece of how your administration handles health. We got to train doctors and clinical staff who are exhibiting if it's explicit bias, then we need outright enforcement, right? We also need to tackle
Is enforcement removal from their jobs?
Well, yeah, if you are racist, if you are nakedly racist, then you have no business being in charge of being in care of anybody.
This conversation just carries on as though it's sensible in any way. Oh, we'll just fire all the country's racist doctors. That'll fix these numbers we don't like. First of all, what does it mean to be explicitly racist in the way Pete describes? What if the country's best surgeon enjoys a spicy joke from time to time? Sorry, fat lady needing emergency postpartum heart surgery. We fired our best guy because he laughed at the wrong meme. Do we really want ideological conformity as a prerequisite for professional licensure? Not just in medicine, but in any industry. Competence and skill might be wiser priorities. And beyond that, do we really want federal authority over that licensure? The states license physicians, not the federal government. The federal government can't just bully its way into that state domain. The feds already tried to do this under George W. Bush. Attorney General John Ashcroft tried to go after Oregon doctors on opposition to the state's legal assisted suicide. Justice Anthony Kennedy, writing for the Supreme Court majority, said, nope, sorry, dude. The states have the authority to define the medical practice in every locality, not the federal government. But apparently the answer is yes. Yes, we do want a massively expanded federal government because, as Pete describes, it's not possible that these unequal health outcomes are simply a product of unequal lifestyle choices. No, it's because every aspect of American life is racist. So we're going to clench the federal fist around all of it.
I'm proposing that we supercharge the Office of Health Equity and Justice, have that in HHS, but also have it in every department that has any bearing on health. We got to make sure we're dealing with things like environmental injustice that help propel this, right? Again, before you even get to the clinical environment, the fact that you may have been redlined into a neighborhood where there's more contamination or more air pollution. We've seen the statistics on things like asthma and how much more of a threat that is to black and brown children. We got to be acting literally on the safety of where you live. I mean, look no further than Flint, where children are being poisoned, not only as a consequence of racism in something like a medical system, but in the setup of the entire environment in which they live.
Was the Flint water crisis really a product of racism, or was it a product of unchecked government control? Flint is an example of government poisoning people, not government saving people, not to mention everything else he cites as supposed institutional racism is already subject to government control. It's already illegal. The CDC is already throwing bundles of federal cash to try to fight the issue of maternal mortality. It's illegal for hospitals to discriminate in the way he describes. It's illegal for lenders to redline in the way he describes. There's already a Federal Consumer Protection Bureau forcing banks to hand over millions for supposed racial discrimination in lending, and we already have a plenty powerful EPA dishing out cash for environmental justice. And yet, the problem remains. Centralized control and an infinite taxpayer money funnel have only worsened the problem, in fact, but we're still going to sell this nonsense about how just a little more power for Pete and just a couple more bucks plucked from your wallet will finally get us to the utopia where all races die in childbirth at exactly equal rates. Or alternatively, we can finally accept the reality that in a free society, there is no such thing as equal outcome. I choose different things than you do. You choose different things than I do. And we both enjoy the benefits and suffer the consequences of the wisdom of those choices. And that's not just okay, that's actually desirable. It means that good or bad, at least you got to choose your own path. The only way you and I get exactly identical outcomes is if we're confined to exactly identical cells. And that's why I'll take McDonald's fed right through the umbilical cord over Mayor Pete's federally mandated prosperity plan every single time with no questions asked. Other than whether I want to supersize it, of course, and then the racists will force me to say yes. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.